The candle toppled as the young initiate's fingertip lingered on the 13th ring and wax splattered across concentric ink. Suspicion tightened the analyst's jaw. He set the magnifier down with deliberate fingers and leaned over the table. The scriptorium keeper barked for light and slammed a palm on the shutter, bathing the cracked papyrus in hard flame. "What is that mark?" the keeper demanded. The question carried threat. Within 2 breaths a deacon could arrive and carry the paper away. The central problem stood in the open. Did this map lead upward towards salvation, or did it open a door that ought to remain locked? The analyst was mid-40s, olive skin, salt, and pepper hair combed back, always with the brass magnifier on its cord around his neck. He did not shout. He lifted the magnifier, reviewed the rings, and tapped the margins with a fingernail as if testing for hidden glue. The candlelight showed uneven ink strokes, a later hand writing a cramped numeral next to the outer circle. "Scriptorium keeper," he said. "Hold the light still." The keeper obeyed, knuckles whitening on the iron and wood desk. Outside, someone moved in the lane. Voices drifted and then stopped. The young initiate, a small person with hands already ink-stained, kept their face down. They did not speak until the analyst slid the leather notebook toward them. "Tell me how you found it," he said. The initiate swallowed and said, "I copied a diagram for practice, and this one was folded inside another." He caught the young initiate's hand behind the table, fingers closing on a torn scrap of papyrus stamped with a faint 13-point seal. Suspicion tightened the analyst's jaw as he lifted the scrap into the candlelight and read the smudged impression. The immediate problem was visible. Someone had attempted to steal a portion of the scriptorium's map. Flames from the knocked candle still dripped wax along the concentric ink, and the discovery forced an instant confrontation. The occult analyst moved without ceremony. He set the brass magnifier on the table with a measured tap, then folded his coat back to reveal the scholar's stole beneath. He did not ask a question at first. Instead, he watched the young initiate's fingers, watched how the initiate drew the scrap inward under the palm. That small action told him more than a rehearsed denial would. He had been in Alexandria long enough to read hesitation the way others read letters. "Give it here, initiate," the analyst. His voice was the even baritone of someone who recorded facts into margins and expected truth to sit within them. The initiate's breathing hitched. "Give it here, Elias," the analyst repeated, naming him by the small tag stitched to the initiate's tunic. Elias withdrew his hand as if stung. Elias began, then closed his mouth. His fingers smudged the edge of the seal. He looked at the door as if assessing escape. The scriptorium keeper, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, pounded the shutter with a flat palm and barked for light. "Marcus," the analyst, "shut the shutter." "Stay where you are." Marcus snapped the shutter. The room narrowed to candle pools and stacked manuscripts. The analyst's suspicion hardened into a tactical decision. Isolate the fragment, isolate the person, test the story. He had seen this pattern before. A hand that lingered on a forbidden ring. A candle toppled in a previous episode that had left wax across the 13th ring. He remembered that detail plainly, the way the young initiate's fingertip had lingered on the 13th ring before wax spilled. That earlier misstep informed his next move. "Elias, put the scrap on the table and step back," Marcus ordered. His voice was short, not kindly. The initiate set the scrap down with 2 fingers, and then covered it with his other hand, as if a second covering might erase the action. The analyst tapped the margin of a nearby folio with the brass magnifier, a rhythm he used to draw attention without raising his voice. The keeper's apprentice, a narrow-faced youth named Julian, stepped forward holding a folded rag. "Why would you take the scriptorium's papers?" "Julian." His tone carried accusation, not curiosity. He wanted a culprit. He wanted to restore order. "Elias, I only touched it." "I didn't take it." He avoided eyes. He kept his mouth working on a sentence that refused to form. The analyst leaned forward and pointed at the scrap. "You did not only touch it. You tried to hide it. Your thumb smudges are recent. Who you about the 13th ring? Elias' knuckles went white. I saw a trace. I saw the ring and I had a vision. The analyst's jaw moved. He felt suspicion and then a concrete shift, doubt. He paused before naming the doubt. The pause was deliberate. He watched Elias' hands for the tell he had seen that night the candle toppled. The fingertip that lingered too long, the tremor in the palm, vision. Marcus barked, "You speak of visions now. You bring visions into our rooms." "Marcus," the analyst interrupted, "we will not cast him out or bind him yet. Tell me, Elias, who taught you to mark the rings?" Elias stared at the seal on the scrap. "No one in the scriptorium. I saw lines in the dreams. A man without a face told me to look for a 13-point sign. He showed me the stair where the light breaks." He the final phrase too quickly, and then clamped, his lips closed. Julian stepped closer and seized the scrap with gloved fingers. He unfolded it until a marginal cipher became visible. A cramped string of strokes that mapped a route between two rings. Julian read the cipher aloud in a clipped tone. "It names Marcellus of Berenice, banned from our ledgers." The analyst's suspicion reasserted itself as a hypothesis. An insider collusion, an external hand guiding forbidden ascents. He directed Julian to set the scrap on a clean folio and to fetch the keeper's index volume. The act of fetching served two purposes. It moved Julian into the stacks where he could not overhear whispered bargains, and it forced the group to act, to stay anchored to evidence rather than rumor. While Julian moved, the analyst inspected Elias with his magnifier. He noted the thin scar along Elias's eyebrow. No, that scar belonged to him, not Elias. He blinked and corrected his attention to the initiator's face. Pale, pupils small from lack of sleep, the corners of the mouth shaded with ink. Elias's hands twitched when the analyst's gaze shifted to the ring on his own right hand. The analyst's bronze signet, thin and worn, flashed in the candlelight. Julian returned with the index volume and spread it open. The analyst ran a finger down the list of banned scholars until his finger stopped at Marcellus of Berenice. Next to the name was a short note, exiled for ritualized ascent, extreme methods. Seal pattern resembles 13-point emblem. He tapped the note. "Marcellus burned our trust once." Marcus, voice low. "Why is his name here now?" Outside, a knock struck the shutter. It was hard and urgent. The group froze. The knock became a demand. 3 more raps followed in quick succession. Marcus' hand went to a peg on the shutter and then recoiled. The analyst stepped to the door and peered through the small spy slit. A hooded figure stood on the threshold, rain beading on the cloak, breath visible in the gutter light. "We have come for the parchment," the hooded voice called. It was muffled, but the demand was clear. The analyst heard the syllables tighten into a threat. The intrusion changed the room's geometry. What had been an internal theft now had external eyes watching the scriptorium. The knock introduced a new fact. The analyst's suspicion folded into a third motion. Alertness, the sharpening of priorities toward protection. Marcus widened his stance. "We have nothing for you," he called. He keyed the shutter. "We will not hand over scriptorium property to strangers." "Leave," the hooded messenger replied with a softer but firmer voice. "You will give me the parchment, keeper. The parchment that names the way between rings. Give it now and no blood will fall at your door." Julian swallowed. He looked at Elias and then at the analyst. "Someone else knows, Julian. They know we have a fragment. They know Marcellus' pattern." Elias went pale and grabbed his own chest as if to steady a sudden pressure. His lips moved, but no sound came. The analyst realized the room had narrowed again, not just from shutter and candle, but from the knowledge that someone outside already pursued the fragment. The tension moved from the theft to the safety of the scriptorium and to a question of collusion within. Marcus slammed his palm flat on the shutter and met the analyst's gaze. "Lock the stacks," Marcus ordered. "If they press, we will not open." The analyst considered options and then chose interrogation. He led Elias into the stacked manuscript alcove. There were 3 reasons. The alcove offered privacy. It kept the scrap in view, and it allowed the keeper to secure the door without subjecting Elias to public shame among the other scribes. Inside the alcove the air smelled of dust and linseed oil. Shelves rose like stone tiers. Elias, tell me again about the vision, but speak plainly, the analyst. He kept his voice steady to force Elias toward concrete detail. Suspicion still lay between them, but now it required translation into fact. Elias' mouth tightened. His hands kept returning to his chest as if to check an internal bruise. Elias, he placed his hand on my shoulder. The 13th ring could be reached if one followed the broken stair and spared the watcher's name. He me to find the 13 points and to mark the 3rd ring from the outer edge. I came because I thought I could see it with my eyes open. His sentences came in small bursts. Who taught you the watcher's name? The analyst. Elias blinked. No one. He the name aloud, but I could not keep it. It faded. The analyst felt a change in the room. Doubt shifted into worry. He noticed Elias' hands tremble when he said the name was gone. He felt his own skin prickle around the scar near his eyebrow. He touched the thin bronze signet ring at his finger and felt the metal's cool weight. The ring had been cracked and repaired. Its interior bore an indistinct mark. That detail nagged like an unread footnote. The analyst ordered Julian to bring clean parchment and ink. He wanted to copy the marginal cipher and test it against the scriptorium's maps. While Julian worked, Marcus and the analyst moved the scrap to the examination table. The analyst placed the scrap on a sheet of clean vellum and held a light above it. The tiny strokes in the cipher formed a root between 2 rings and a shortened name. M. Berenice. Julian's fingers hovered. Marcellus of Berenice is dead to our records, Julian. He spoke the name as if reading an old indictment. He was banned for leading students past the archons. He promised ascent without oversight. The analyst set the magnifier down and rubbed his thumb along the margin of the scrap. He remembered the candle that had toppled in the previous hour and how wax had spattered across the 13th ring. That concrete memory informed his next step. He moved to the scratched stair between rooms, the one the initiate had traced the night before with a fingertip. If the cipher named a rote between rings, the stair would be the physical threshold that the ritual exploited. He Marcus to guard the shutter and to keep the hooded messenger at bay. Marcus obeyed with a nod and a fixed jaw. The analyst gathered the keeper's apprentice, Julian, and Elias and led them to the concealed stairwell. The stair was narrow and worn. Each step bore a notch where many hands had gripped the rail. Light fell in a single strip from an upper slit. At the landing, the analyst traced a chalk circle on the topmost worn tread and then drew a sequence of lines to map the ritual route as the cipher indicated. Elias watched, lips parted. Julian held the scrap near the candle but did not touch it. Marcus kept one hand on the shutter key as if the door might erupt. The analyst recited a short, authorized examination phrase from memory. He spoke slowly so that every inflection could be heard and repeated by others in the group. When he finished, a living obstruction rose from the threshold. It was not wind or smoke, but a shimmer along the stair's edge, a tightness of light that ran across the chalk lines. The analyst's body reacted before his mind labeled the reaction. He stepped back, hand to the signet at his finger. His suspicion became fear in the form of reflexive movement. He felt the hair along his arms lift. The shimmer coalesced into a stuttering dark that pushed against the candlelight. It made a soft, dry sound like paper pulled from a shelf. The initiate staggered forward and reached for the stair. "Elias!" Julian cried, "Do not touch it!" Elias did not hear the warning in time. His hand found the edge of the border and his fingers brushed the chalk line. The group watched as his skin tightened, then convulsed. The analyst lunged and grabbed Elias beneath the armpits, pulling him backward. Elias' knees buckled. Marcus and Julian helped catch him. For a breath the stair held, as if testing whether it had claimed a willing subject. The shimmer shrank and then sloughed away like a film pulled from a page. The analyst stepped closer and saw a burned sigil mark on his own palm, where the metal of his signet had rubbed against skin during the struggle. The brand was faint but present, an inner fissure that matched the 13-point emblem. Everything in the room changed dimension at that instant. Trust cracked. A ring had fallen from the analyst's hand and split, revealing within an inner mark that linked the scriptorium's authority to the 13th-point emblem. Marcus swore under his breath. Julian's fingers trembled. Elias lay against the wall and breathed shallowly. The ring, Marcus. He met the analyst's eyes. Your ring. Did you ever tell us its origin? The analyst held the broken ring between thumb and forefinger. He had worn it for years. It had been described in his notes as a family trinket, a scholar's token. Now its interior matched the seal on the scrap. The implication was immediate. The scriptorium's own seal bore the 13th point. Collusion could not be dismissed. A quiet accusation shifted the room from fear toward betrayal. Julian's voice cracked. Either one of us has lied already, or someone forged our ring. Elias' eyes opened and fixed on the analyst. I followed a voice, he said. It me to seek the ring that would open the stair. I thought I could stop it. I did not know the ring belonged to you, sir. Marcus paced 3 steps and then stopped with his palms on the table. He looked at the broken ring. If the scriptorium seal matches the 13th emblem, then either Marcellus had access once, or we have been laundering his pattern under another name. Someone inside must have sheltered him. The analyst felt another shift within himself. Resolve. He had moved from suspicion to doubt, from doubt to fear, and now toward a cold, procedural resolve. He ordered Julian to catalogue the scrap, to copy the cipher, and to lock the original in a chest. He Marcus to seal the stair, and to question each scribe who had worked near the ring in the past fortnight. He put Elias in a chair and instructed him to drink water and unbind his fingers. Before they could execute the orders, the shutter rattled and the hooded messenger's voice returned with a new cadence. Open, keeper. We will not ask twice. Hand over anything that names the route between rings, Marcus answered. We will not hand anything to an armed messenger. Go away, he spoke loudly to cover the trembling in his own voice. The analyst watched the dynamics. Outside, force. Inside, fracture. He recognized a tactical choice that must be made now and not later. Julian, the analyst, bring the keeper's ledger. Open it to entries 3 nights ago and read aloud the visitors noted. I will listen for Marcellus or any strange names. If we find a pattern, we know who to blame. Julian fetched the ledger with shaking hands. He turned the pages and read the entries in short lines. 3 nights ago. A scholar called Elias requested after hours access. 2 nights ago. Anonymous plea for access to restricted folia. Last night. A young hand left a candle unattended. The analyst's memory stitched the fragments into a sharper picture. He, Alias. Cross-reference Elias with banned correspondences. Marcus, did you ever sign a ledger for a man named Elias? Marcus swore and shook his head, no. But the keeper's index is swollen. People come with letters. We record names by request and sometimes only by sight. Julian's finger landed on a small marginal note in the ledger. Elias, alias for Marcellus. The tiny scratch looked like someone had tried to hide a correction. The room droned with the sound of the rain at the shutter, and with the distant, hollow steps of a messenger pacing the threshold. At that point a second external event occurred, a soft, hurried footfall in the corridor beyond the scriptorium. A page, a woman named Thalia who served as an errand runner, burst in carrying a wet letter. Keeper, sir, someone left this at the threshold and fled, she said. Her breath came in small bursts. She handed the letter to Marcus. Marcus opened it and read aloud. The letter contained a phrase. Return what is owed and the way will be yours. The sign was a shorten none of them could read without context, but the tone was precise. Extortion. The analyst's suspicion now aimed at both internal betrayal and external pressure. He folded the letter and placed it beside the broken ring. Elias pushed himself upright and, with a voice thin but steady, said, "It me for the ring." The keeper would not notice if the signet slipped from its place. I took it because the voice said the ring would lead me up. His sentences were sharp. He did not soften them. He had moved from blind compliance to confession. Marcus and Julian argued with quick interchange. If Marcellus has contacts, Marcus started. Then he used them to get names into ledger margins. Julian snapped. Someone annotated the ledger. Someone here wrote his name in shorthand. Who wrote it? Marcus demanded. "We will find out." The analyst replied. He felt the room tilt toward action. He had to decide: conceal the fragment and protect the scriptorium's reputation, or expose the leak and invite outside power into their halls. The choice would bind their hands either way. Before the group could reach a decision, the shimmer repeated at the stair's threshold. This time it recoiled less politely. The analyst did not hesitate. He stepped onto the stair and planted both boots firm on the chalk circle he had drawn earlier. He lifted his right palm and pressed the broken ring's inner face into the chalk tread. The ring's metal made a thin, metallic click against the stone. The shimmer flared and then drew inward like the closing of a thin eye. For an instant the stair seemed to hold still in recognition, and then it released a breath of cold that skimmed past their faces. Elias convulsed again, but this time his body slumped with exhaustion rather than the seizure of an active pull. The analyst removed the ring and set it on the table. He faced the group and spoke with a clarity that left no room for poetic evasions. "We cannot leave this alone," he said. "The ring's mark ties us to the 13th emblem. Someone inside has matched our seal to that pattern. Marcus, seal the ledger entries for the week. Julian, copy and secure the cipher. Elias, you will remain under watch. We decide in daylight whether to notify the council." Marcus' hand closed into a fist. "If we bring this to the council, they will burn whatever they find and question every hand in this room. If we bury it, the leak will remain and outside forces will keep coming." Julian looked at the broken ring and then at Elias. "If we hide this, we keep the secret, but we may become complicit in murder or worse. If we hand it over, we invite a purge. Which harm do we choose?" Julian's question hung heavy and decisive. The analyst inhaled and let the syllables land. He could not answer in theory. He had to act in a way that matched evidence and protected lives. "We will document everything, then we will vote. If 2 of us request the council, we go. If not, we lock the fragment away and increase watches." Marcus' jaw worked. He looked at the broken ring and then at the shutter. The hooded messenger had not yet tried to batter the door down. Outside, the messenger waited. "We will finish this by first light." Marcus finally. He moved across the table and set the broken ring in a small wooden box. He put the ledger and the scrap beside it and slid the lid shut. Elias breathed more steadily. His eyes found the analyst. "I did not mean harm," he said. "I only followed the voice." The analyst watched the initiate's hands, watched how they curled and uncurl. He felt a last emotional shift from fear and suspicion to a cold duty that steadied his voice. "Your act forced our hand, Elias. We will hold you until we know whether you were led or coerced. If you were used, we will name who used you. If you acted alone, we will accept the consequences." Outside, a soft scraping sound signaled the messenger as retreat. The immediate external danger ebbed but did not vanish. Marcus set the shutter bolt and turned the key with a flat movement. The group sat with the box between them. The analyst placed his hand near the wood but did not touch it. He thought of the earlier wax on the 13th ring and of the fingerprint on the scrap. He thought of the ledger's marginal note and of how a single altered entry could reweave an order of ascent. He had a list of steps to follow before dawn. Census of visitors, chain of custody for the ring, interviews with scribes who had signed ledgers, and a decision on whether to expose the leak. He tapped the magnifier twice against the table to punctuate the plan. Julian voiced the first procedural step aloud. "We will copy the marginal cipher. Catalogue all recent entries, and lock the stair. We will set watches and question every scribe who worked at night in the past week. Marcus looked at Elias. You will be watched. Initiate. You will not leave the scriptorium without 2 witnesses. Elias nodded once. He had no defense left beyond truth. He leaned his head back against the chair and closed his eyes. The analyst gathered the ledger, the scrap, and the broken ring and placed them into the wooden box. He handed the box to Marcus. Lock it in the inner chest and post 2 watchers. Do not let anyone remove it without all of us present. We keep a chain of custody. Marcus took the box and stood. He nodded and moved toward the vault. The analyst watched him go, then looked at Julian and Elias. He tapped the edge of his magnifier, a small, habitual action that steadied him. In the final light before dawn, the group arranged themselves. The scriptorium would either conceal the fragment to protect its reputation or expose the leak and invite external intervention. The analyst placed his hand briefly over the break in his own ring and felt the cold of the metal. The broken ring lay in the chest like a sleeping thing. The decision to act or to hide sat in the air as plainly as the candle flame. Outside, rain stilled. Inside, the scriptorium chose procedure over panic for the moment and sealed the box. Marcus closed the inner chest and turned the key. The lock clicked. The final paragraph of the chapter is a concrete beat. Marcus slid the sealed box under the latched bench and set 2 sentries at the doorway. The decision whether to inform the council would be made at dawn, and the initiate Elias would remain under watch until then. He seized the young initiate's wrist as the folio slid from beneath the papyri, fingers catching cloth and paper in a small, hard sound. Suspicion tightened his jaw. The occult analyst held the folio with one hand and pushed back a candle with the other to see the seal. The seal was gone from the folio's edge. A torn ring of ink remained where 13 should sit. Stop, the analyst, do not pull at it. The scriptorium smelled of beeswax and damp vellum. The young initiate's palm trembled. He was small, shoulders hunched under a thin student robe, eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and something else the analyst could not name. The analyst's voice stayed low. Who you to take this? The initiate said, a teacher. He promised ascent. The line landed like a stone. The story shifted immediately from petty theft to coercion. Suspicion had been the analyst's first motion. Doubt came next. He had seen attempts to copy diagrams before, but this mention of a teacher outside the school altered the stakes. The analyst looked away from the initiate and toward the shuttered window where the scriptorium keeper stood, hands clenched at his belt. Scriptorium keeper's voice cut across the table. Who is this teacher? Name him. He moved to block the corridor. Aram. The analyst called, and Scribe Aram looked up from a shelf, ink on his fingers. Scribe Aram crossed the room. He was taller and broader than the initiate, hair cropped close, a practical hand that steadied a quill without hesitation. He bent to examine the disrupted stack, the folios torn here. Our arm, tapping the edge. Someone has sketched one ring and left the rest. This is intentional. The discovery brought immediate action. The keeper reached for the initiate's sleeve and found a scrap of papyrus half, hidden beneath the robe. The scrap bore an outline of the 13th ring and a smudged ink impression of a seal, the same faint 13. Point motif the analyst had seen under a magnifier the week before. He remembered the candle that toppled in Chapter 1. He remembered the seal scrap the analyst had lifted into the candlelight in Chapter 2. Those incidents were not accidents now. The room tightened. You stole it. The keeper to the initiate. You caved to temptation. The initiate answered, voice thin, I did not want to. He whispered at the stairs. The school would stop me if I waited. He wanted the diagram sent to someone outside. Aram's face went blank for a heartbeat. The analyst watched him close his mouth like a man holding back a laugh. Then Aram reached for the folio. We should lock this and call Miriam, he said. Steady and quick, seal it in the chest. The analyst did not move. He had studied diagrams. He knew that destroying the map erased clues as effectively as preservation. "We cannot burn this yet," he said. "We learn more by reading than by destroying." Elder Miriam's name changed the room's temperature. The keeper spat a soft sound. "Miriam will decide. She will not have unauthorized copies leave this scriptorium." The council assembled in the thin chamber beyond the stacks. Elder Miriam arrived with 3 candles and a linen wrap at her throat. She was smaller, older than Aram, but carried authority in each slow step. The analyst set the torn folio on the council table. "We found a hidden sketch and a torn ring," he said. "This was not random." Miriam lifted the scrap and peered at the same faint seal. She tapped the edge. "Who handled this last?" she asked. The keeper answered with a list. Names fell like stones into the chamber's hush. The analyst watched faces as decisions formed. They argued in a tight, rapid exchange. The analyst pushed for study. The keeper pushed for destruction. "If we decode it here," the analyst, "we may learn who tempted the initiate and why. If we keep it," the keeper replied, "we risk escalation." "A map leaks power." Elder Miriam looked at both men and at the torn paper. "We will not have our school broken for a rumor," she said. "Bring me Aram's ledger and the chest keys." Outside the council room, Aram moved as though the conversation had given him permission. He disappeared into the stacks with a small lamp. The analyst followed at a measured distance. He watched Aram open a false board in a shelf and place a folded sheet into a cedar box. The analyst had the thought and then the certainty. Someone else already knew how to hide a copy. Aram closed the box, fingers lingering on the lid. When the analyst reached for the box, Aram jerked back. "This is a private note, Aram, a scribe's practice." "Not your concern," the analyst's voice narrowed. "Show me." Aram pulled the box from the shelf and the analyst saw, beneath a stack of mundane inventories, a second paper with an unmistakable 13-point impression. Aram's hand tightened. He looked away from the analyst. "I drew it to understand the layout," he said. "I meant no harm." The room filled with a different current. Betrayal moved in where suspicion had settled. The keeper's face went red. "Aram, you stole from us," he said. "You copied the diagram." Aram's reply cut quick. "I copied it because I feared we were hoarding knowledge. I thought to send it to a colleague, to a rival circle." "Miriam, who is this colleague?" Aram hesitated. "A man named Theon. He writes from outside the city." He offered exchange. "Texts for safe passage to engage the ascent." Elder Miriam slammed a palm on the table. "You broke our vow, Aram." The analyst noticed the way Aram's shoulders folded, the way his fingers uncurling betrayed them. He also noticed the way the initiate watched Aram with a pleading expression, and for an instant the analyst felt something like regret for having held the initiate's wrist. This registered as an internal shift. Suspicion had become anger, then a lean toward understanding. Aram's confession was a plot twist. The stolen fragment was not an act of private curiosity but an attempted exfiltration. The analyst recorded the facts in his mind, one tight note at a time. This changed the meaning of the earlier candle toppling and the torn scrap found in Chapter 2. Those earlier events were no longer isolated sloppiness. They were moves in a plan. The council argued aloud, voices sharp. "Lock him." The keeper, "Turn him out." "No." The analyst, "We need to know Theon. We need to see what he offered." Miriam looked at the analyst and then at Aram. "We will question Aram privately," she said. "If he confesses a plan to send this out, we will strip his ledger and search his contacts." In the private questioning that followed, the analyst listened while Aram admitted the ledger entries and described Theon's letters. Aram's speech had a rush to it, like someone trying to justify past choices. He promised transit and texts. Aram, he promised a path beyond the archons. The school only keeps pieces, not the whole." The analyst interrupted. "Did Theon say why 13? Aram traced a line with an ink-stained finger. 13 is completion. It was a map of ascent. One ring opens the next if struck in sequence." The analyst felt an old caution return. Ritual sequences that depended on precise action could tear more than paper. He had seen diagrams that matched rites in older communities. He thought of the initiate's trembling hand at the table. He thought of the scrap of seal stamped into the margin and of the candle that had toppled in the first chapter. That candle had splashed wax across the ink. Now, with Aram admitting contact, the analyst began to see a larger network. The council decided on a guarded solution. Miriam would not destroy the folio yet. They would bind a portion and lock it under 2 seals. But before they could carry that out, the initiate pushed his chair back and bolted for the corridor. "I have to stop him," the initiate said. "He will take the piece to Theon tonight." Aram moved toward the shuttered corridor at the same instant. The room cracked into motion. The keeper grabbed a candle, the analyst snatched his magnifier, and the initiate raced ahead. The chase threaded through narrow aisles between stacked codices, skirts of vellum scraping cloth. The morning light had not yet fully entered. Slats of brightness cut lines across the stone. The noise of feet on flagstones echoed hollow. Aram ran with a wrapped fragment under his arm. The initiate leaped, fingers nearly closing on Aram's sash. The analyst and the keeper collided with a shelf and spilled a stack of loose sheets, sending a small cloud of dust and a sound like a reprimand through the corridor. The initiative of the initiate drove the immediate motion. The analyst's decision to follow turned concern into pursuit. They reached the stone stair that led up toward the ritual chamber. The stair was old, edges worn by many feet. At the base stood a narrow threshold, a short fractured stair that had been used for small offerings. Aram's breath came hard. He pushed the initiate away and crouched to reach the package. He fumbled with the wrapping and the initiate lunged. The analyst grabbed Aram's shoulder. Aram turned, startled, and the wrapped fragment slipped free, paper flittering in a short gust that smelled faintly of ink and cedar. The initiate gathered the loose sheet and, without looking up, began the ascending pattern that had been sketched across the ring. He muttered numbers and struck the floor with the tips of his fingers in time. The analyst saw the pattern form, a sequence drawn in the margin that matched the initiate's small, precise motions. The motion matched Aram's description. The initiate's lips formed a cadence. The analyst lunged to stop him. "Stop," he said, and his hand closed on the initiate's wrist again. Aram tried to wrench the fragment free. He let him go. Let him ascend. His voice had no argument left. It had become command mixed with pleading. The initiate's eyes were fixed on the broken stair above, and for a single beat he did not look at any face in the room. The analyst's fingers tightened. He thrust his body between the initiate and the stair. The initiate's hand brushed the stone in a movement that could have been a step. The analyst felt a sensation in his palms, a small hum across skin and knuckle, and then a flash of light along the edge of the ring, not a metaphor, but a real shimmer at the folio's torn margin. A thin line of air drew across the page and lifted a curled corner of the paper. The analyst could not explain it with the facts at hand, only report the sequence of motions and reactions. Something had begun when the initiate formed the cadence. The analyst's first emotion was raw alarm, fear of the unknown, and then calculation. He must interrupt the sequence with force. He shoved the folio away and snatched the paper from the initiate's hand. The paper tore along an already weakened fold. The ring split further and a thin, bright thread of dust rose like a ribbon and vanished. Aram swore and grabbed the fragment, but the folio was damaged. The initiate sagged to his knees, breathing short, a cough from forced inhalation. The keeper moved to bind Aram, but Aram suddenly broke free, abandoning the attempt to secure the hole and running instead for the city gate. He bolted through the shuttered corridor, the lamplight bouncing on a strip of armor he had no right to wear. The council tried to respond. "Stop him!" Miriam ordered. The keeper sprinted after Aram. The initiate lay on the stone, fingers curled around the torn paper, eyes closed. The analyst crouched beside him, placed a palm on the initiate's shoulder to steady his breath, and felt the boy's pulse stutter under his hand. Outside, the city roared with merchants and carts. Aram's flight was a line in that noise, a man dodging between vendors. He had a narrow head start and a clear direction, the road toward the eastern gate where Theon's couriers might wait. The analyst had a decision to make. He could order the keeper to pursue and reveal the school to the street, or he could cover the incident and follow quietly. Miriam met his eyes in the stairwell. She breathed out once. "He will shame us if he leaves with a copy," she said. "We cannot allow this map to travel. We must recover what was taken." The analyst replied, "But if we name the map to the street, every rival will know it exists. We will chase shadows." Miriam's hand trembled on the table edge. "Then go quietly. Follow Aram. Bring the ledger. I will care for the initiate." The analyst gathered a portion of the folio that remained whole and slid it into his leather notebook. He wrapped the torn fragment in linen and tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat, where the brass magnifier normally hung. He hesitated only long enough to look at the initiate and see the boy's jaw working. The initiate opened his eyes and mouthed. "Find him." The analyst stepped into the lane alone. He kept his hood low and his face steady. He did not run at first. He tested Aram's trail with measured steps, watching footprints in dust and the smear of a cloak on a door jamb. The city offered immediate clues. A storekeeper pointed toward the east gate. A child shouted a direction. Each concrete detail stacked into a map. 2 blocks later, the analyst nearly lost the trail. Then he found a scrap of linen caught on a nail where Aram had pushed through a shutter. The analyst picked it up. The linen had a faint scrap of ink matching Aram's hand, a notation of hours and a set of names. He recognized Theon's signature stroke. This was the twist that reoriented the case. Aram had not acted alone. He had coordinated with an outside contact who had promised transit. The analyst folded the linen into his palm and moved faster. At the city gate, a courier stood with a bundle of parchments. He glanced at the analyst, and then at a man who matched Aram's description, but Aram was not present. The courier said, "No one by that name came through. Leave your business with the guard." The guard was a stout man and looked uninterested in a torn folio. The analyst measured his approach and then turned away, deciding to shadow the courier instead of confronting the gate. His pursuit took him into alleys where clotheslines crossed the air and pigeons flapped. He lost Aram once and found him again by a tavern doorway, arguing with a cloaked figure. Theon had a face like a merchant, rounded and forgetful. He smiled as if bargaining for wool. Aram spoke quickly. The analyst could not hear words, only the rhythm of a conversation that ended with the handing over of a small leather pouch. The analyst stepped forward and spoke the name Theon. The merchant's smile froze. Theon looked at Aram, then at the analyst, and then at the leather pouch. Aram's hands went empty. He backed toward a dark doorway. "I had no choice." "Aram," he promised safe passage. He promised texts. Theon slid the pouch into his cloak. "I did not know he would use force." "Theon, this is business. I have buyers. I sell knowledge to those who will pay." The analyst's voice did not rise. "You sell a means to open the rings. You sell a route people cannot fully comprehend. That is dangerous." Theon shrugged and reached for a coin. "Dangerous is the market. I am a merchant of texts. Ask Miriam. Let her bind me, not me your scorn." Aram moved as if to strike Theon. "You lied to me," he said. "You promised a guide and left me to face the school alone," Theon answered. "You wanted the map. You took it and you lost it. I deliver, not redeem." A scuffle broke out. Theon backed away and let a heavy hand strike Aram's shoulder. Aram cursed and staggered. The analyst stepped between them and took a steadying hold of Aram's sleeve. "Aram," he said, "you made a choice. Walk with me. We will bring you back to Miriam." Aram's face had a new hardness. "I am leaving," he said. "If you follow, you will only see me vanish into the sea of those who seek ascent." He spat the final word like it was both accusation and plea. The analyst tightened his grip. "You led them here. You make restitution. Walk." Aram shoved the analyst away, turned, and ran. The analyst called his name and lunged after him. Theon vanished into the crowd with the leather pouch. The chase dissolved into the city lanes. The analyst followed Aram along a line of motion, feeling the friction of decision. He could return to the school and report failure, or he could stay on the trail and risk becoming complicit in breach. He chose to follow. He moved through the market and into the river quarter where boats shifted and ropes creaked. There, Aram climbed a low boat and pushed off. The analyst reached the quay and watched the boat pull away. He could not see Aram's face. He noted only the fold of a cloak and the tilt of a head. He recorded the detail and committed it as a lead. Back at the scriptorium, the initiate sat in a narrow chamber under Miriam's watch. He kept pressing his palms to his knees and repeating the cadence under his breath. Miriam fed him broth and watched for tremors. The keeper paced the hall. They had patched what remained of the folio and bound it under 2 seals. The analyst arrived hours later, muddy at the hem of his coat and with a small piece of linen tucked into his notebook. He placed the linen on the table. Aram left with a pouch and a buyer named Theon, he said. He rode east. Elder Miriam read the notation, fingers tracing the ink. "Then we are not done," she said. "We will send word to trusted hands along the coast. We will be careful about whom we name." The analyst watched her, then turned to the initiate. The boy's hands trembled less now. He had a quiet look in his eyes, like someone who had seen more than his years should permit. The analyst set the magnifier on the table and tapped it twice to wake a response. "You must tell me everything about that teacher," he said. The initiate named a place under the western aqueduct where a voice had offered the sequence. The analyst noted the detail. He also made a different choice. He would not reveal every lead to council yet. He had preserved a small portion of the torn map in his notebook. He would follow quietly, watch where Aram led, and learn if Theon had partners beyond the coast. The night closed with a slow ritual of repair. The library bound the folio under cloth. Miriam ordered a watch. The keeper took 2 men to post at the gate. The analyst sat at the table with the initiate and wrote an account of the event. Names, times, motions, and the shimmer at the threshold. He wrote only what he could verify. He left out conjecture. He wrote the facts that might lead them to Aram. Before dawn, the analyst took the wrapped fragment from his inner pocket and examined it under the brass magnifier. The torn edge showed an inked line interrupted by wax and scoring. The pattern suggested a keyed sequence. The analyst felt 2 successive shifts inside him. From suspicion to anger at Aram's betrayal. Then from anger to resolve to recover the path before it spread. He rolled the fragment in linen and slid it back into his notebook. He set the magnifier back on the cord, stood, and stretched his shoulders. He had a plan that required a small deception and a longer pursuit. He would follow the river route, inspect Theon's contacts, and not tell Miriam everything until he understood the network. He tied the leather notebook to his belt, took the brass magnifier, and left a sealed note with Miriam. "Keep the initiate safe. Do not reveal the full map." Then he stepped outside into the lane and set his face toward the eastern quay, where Aram had last been seen, taking the last concrete trail he had. A smear of ink on a boat rope and the echo of a hurried oath. The next step would be following footprints into the water sedge. A pale ring of light bloomed in the carved aperture the instant the young initiate pushed the worn 13-point seal into its socket. And the occult analyst lunged forward to stop the turn. Suspicion drove him first, an urgent, physical tightening behind his ribs that made his fingers close around the initiate, wrist without a question. He yanked. The stone resisted. The seal clicked once and the aperture breathed a dry, cold exhale. The scriptorium keeper shouted for the council. Someone slammed a torch against a wall and the stair shuddered under a pressure the analyst had only seen in diagrams. He knew the stakes in plain terms: a breached threshold, a corrupted map, and possibly the ruin of the school's secrecy. Suspicion became complaint when the keeper pushed the initiate back and the council elder stepped between them with his palms flat on the carved stone. "Stop." The elder barked, "Do you understand what you attempt?" The analyst's jaw tightened. He kept the initiate's wrist held between two fingers and kept his voice cool. "Elder, the ring is turning. We must pry the seal free now." Within 5 sentences the room produced a second, concrete danger. The aperture began to widen, not with light only, but with a low angular pressure that made hair on forearms stand up and caused dust to vibrate along the carved grooves. The analyst felt a new emotion shift, doubt sliding under suspicion, as the aperture's sound did not match any known rite. He glanced at the parchment margin poking from the initiate's sleeve and remembered the candle accident from the scriptorium. Wax had splattered the 13th ring, and a folio had gone missing. That memory pushed him to act. He moved to pry the seal while the keeper and elder argued. The scriptorium keeper's boots scuffed the stone. "We protect the map," the keeper, voice tight. "You risk everything for a scrap of paper." The initiate pushed back with his free hand. "You hide the truth," she said, voice raw. "You bury my teacher." The analyst did not let their words slow his hands. He placed the brass magnifier over the carved rings, leaned his face close enough to taste dust, and found the overwritten glyphs. The glyphs had been altered. Several aeonic symbols bore blunt strokes of a foreign tool, different chiseling, as if someone had forced a new pattern into an older form. He tapped the overwritten stroke with his magnifier and felt the second emotion shift, anger hardening into a fierce resolve. "Someone changed the map," he said. "Not all hands here made those marks." He called for the archivist. The archivist arrived, breathless, and moved to the aperture with a candle. "We keep the records whole," the archivist, fingers already skimming the carved rings, voice measured. The analyst held up the scrap of papyrus he had taken from the initiate the night the folio slid. Its edge was singed where the seal had pressed. The scriptorium keeper and the council elder argued in quick, clipped lines. "Seal it." The keeper, "Do you want the archons at our gate?" "We must know what the initiate sought." The elder answered, "If a teacher is lost, we must evaluate the claim." They volleyed 3 more times, voices overlapping. "We archive it. We interrogate first. You would open the threshold again." The argument reached a small frenzy. The initiate moved closer, voice breaking. "The folio says he is alive beyond the 10th ring," she said. "You taught us to rescue, to ascend." Her hands shook so badly the folio nearly slipped. The council's faces closed like shutters. An external event came. The aperture exhaled a tremor and a distant metallic clang sounded from within the stair. The keeper stumbled. The pressure rose in the analyst's ears, and he felt his shoulders pull tight. He chose a course. Pry the seal rather than let the corrupted pattern set. He pressed his thumb under the ring and twisted with a controlled, taut force. The ring shifted microdegrees. The initiate tried to step forward and the analyst tightened his hold, eyes on the overwritten glyphs. "Do not," the elder whispered, but too late. A sliver of sound like dry parchment tearing reached them. They hauled the seal free. Underneath, the carved rings showed a layered abrasion. Someone had ground away the original vein of the 11th glyph and replaced it with a blunt cipher. The analyst smelled burned oil and old glue. He lifted the torn scrap and flattened it by hand. The scrap sink-it line stopped mid-sentence. A name had been rubbed away. He felt doubt return. Why would the map be altered? Who would risk the school for a single name? The initiate's eyes found his, "My teacher," she said. "They hid him here." Her voice dropped to a hard whisper. "Council elder." He ordered the relocation. She pushed the folio toward the elder. The room turned into argument again. "You accuse me." The elder demanded, "You will not fling accusations in the council chamber." The analyst watched the elder's jaw tighten. The elder's hands trembled. He noticed the elder's fingers had ink stains matching the overwritten grooves. The tangible detail shifted the analyst's suspicion into a new movement, clarity that required confrontation. He stepped between them. "Council Elder, the grooves bear new tooling," he said. "Your fingers are stained with the same ink." "Explain this." The elder's mouth opened and closed. For a full beat he said nothing. Then he spoke in short, clipped sentences. "I did not alter the map. You were in the archive late the month the folio went missing. I handled many seals then." The analyst watched muscle around the elder's eye. The archivist interposed with a steely voice. "We will not decide now by accusation. We will compare the chisel marks under proper light and instrument." The archivist nudged the elder toward the antechamber and motioned for a lamp. "That move east tempers only briefly." An external discovery occurred in the antechamber. Beneath a sheaf of ledger pages, the archivist found a torn corner matching the Initiate S folio. The archivist held it up. "This belongs to the folio," she said. "It was tucked under records of bindings, listed as lost by order of the council elder. I ordered the folio moved, only to preserve students from dangerous knowledge." His voice had the brittle ring of someone defending a choice long made. The Initiate spat. "You hit him to keep power!" The keeper hit the table. Wood echoed. The pressure at the aperture increased again. The archonic presence manifested as a low, metallic whine the analyst could feel in his teeth. The stone shivered. The keeper grabbed the seal and demanded everyone step back. The analyst refused to step away. He moved inward, stopping 3 paces from the aperture, chest tight, hands steady. The archonic presence produced a sensation like a thumb pressing the back of the throat, an urge to flee. The analyst swallowed and felt the final emotion shift, resolve synthesized from suspicion and doubt. He would risk himself rather than let a corrupted pattern set the school's course. "We cannot let it open with that cipher," he said, and then turned the seal with a strength that forced his shoulder and elbow to burn. The young initiate tried to wrench free again. He held, the aperture pushed, and in response the analyst slotted the brass magnifier into the crack and used it as a lever. The stone screamed in a high, brittle note. The archonic guardian, if that is what they called the force, pressed like a living hinge. The initiate sobbed. The keeper shouted, "Pull him back." The elder shouted, "Stop!" The archivist called, "Hold the seal steady." There were 3 rapid, raw lines of argument at once, each voice a brittle shard. "Pull back now." The keeper, "Do not risk more." "You can't not simply." The elder began, "Hold him." The archivist barked. The analyst kept the initiate's wrist and forced his weight against the aperture. The seal wore the warmth of the initiate's skin and the cold of the stone. Under the magnifier he saw a hairline fracture run through the seal's rim. He understood the risk. If the seal shattered intact, the corrupted pattern might be imprinted into the aperture. If it shattered, it might scatter dust and ruin forever. The climax began with a physical, decisive motion. The analyst slammed the seal against the inner lip of the socket until the bronze cracked, and the corrupted pattern sheared. A sharp, metallic note like bell metal split the scarce air. The archonic pressure recoiled as if cut. The stone aperture cleaved with a final, thin crack, and a gust of hot, acrid air spilled from the breach. The archivist staggered backward, hands to her face. The initiate fell to her knees and tried to scoop the broken ring pieces, but the analyst pushed her back with a grip that tasted of grit. He reached into the threshold and seized the largest fragment, feeling heat and a faint whisper of script burned into its inside face. In the immediate aftershock, several concrete things occurred. Splinters of bronze tumbled to dust, a coil of incense smoldered out, and a scrap of papyrus flared and blackened where it had been caught between 2 teeth of the seal. The initiate wailed in a raw, physical sound. The keeper swore. The elder leaned on the wall and breathed hard. The archivist moved without ceremony to scoop the seal fragments into a cloth and bag them. The analyst, skin sore from the fracture, found that his thumb bled from a cut where the bronze had sheared. He wrapped it with a strip of linen and did not speak for a long breath. After the crisis, the group tested the aperture edges under lamp light. The archivist ran an instrument across the carved rings and shook her head. The pattern was imposed, not grown, she said. Foreign tooling. Not our school's hand, the elder's shoulders bowed. He looked at the battered initiate and then at the analyst. We acted to prevent harm. He said, voice small, if I misjudged, I accept responsibility. The analyst kept his eyes on the singed scrap he had plucked from the threshold. The scrap bore a phrase in a teacher's hand and a set of numbers referencing an aeon beyond the 10th ring. The name was only partly legible. Someone had tried to scrub it away. That discovery changed motives. The initiate pushed forward. He is alive, she insisted. The folio proves it. The elder's face tightened in a line of hard fatigue. If he is alive beyond the 10th ring, then opening would endanger more than our secrecy. I ordered its relocation because I feared archonic influence. The analyst watched the elder's hands. They trembled as he flexed his fingers. The archivist stepped in. We will move now to secure the archive and review all records from the month the folio went missing. The keeper nodded and barked orders to a scribe to fetch ledger entries. External action kept coming. The scribe ran off. Lamps were trimmed and set in a ring. In the council meeting that followed, the elder demanded secrecy, and the keeper argued for immediate cataloguing and interrogation. The arguments were short and punctuated. Seal the records now. Keeper, do not speak of this beyond these walls. We will examine the archivist's findings first. The elder replied, and we will question the initiate and the analyst in turn. The analyst listened. He felt the final emotional movement settle into sorrow tempered by necessity. He had nearly given himself to the breach. He had paid a small physical price, a shallow burn on his palm and a singed edge on his notes. But the map remained largely intact and, crucially, the corrupted pattern had been shattered rather than impressed. At the end of the meeting, the keeper boxed the largest seal fragments and labeled them with iron nails. The archivist catalogued the singed scrap and compared ink strokes to the elder's hands. The initiate sat with knees drawn and the folio on her lap, quiet. The analyst excused himself and returned to his private study with the singed margin tucked inside his palm. He closed the door and slid the margin into his worn leather notebook, inserting it beside the magnifier and under a folded note where he coded a single phrase in cipher. He did not write conclusions, he recorded specifics: date, time, earthen smell, pressure, tone, a brief note on the altered glyph, strokes. He recalled earlier incidents in the scriptorium, the toppled candle that splattered wax on the 13th ring, the scrap the initiate had tried to steal, the folio that had slid under a pile of papyri. Those concrete memories moved from mere reminders to evidence that someone had attempted a systematic alteration of the map over several weeks. He drew a line in his notebook connecting dates, hands present, and ledger entries that the archivist had found. The line suggested motive: rescue of a teacher, perhaps, or a faction within the school seeking a different path. The analyst circled the suspected dates and felt a new cold in his throat. He would pursue the thread, but not openly. The final scenes unfolded with precise, physical decisions. The council insisted on secrecy. The keeper boxed the fragments, and the archivist sealed them with resin and stamped them with the school's mark. The elder signed an order that the initiate remain under supervised instruction while the incident was reviewed. The initiate refused to meet the elder's eyes and placed the folio back within her skirts. She turned to the analyst and, in a single short sentence, demanded, "Find him," he answered with a short, formal line. "I will search the records." He would do it in secret, because the council's public action was to archive and conceal. That night the analyst sat at his table with the brassy smell of spent oil and a thin radiance from a single lamp. He traced the singed margin under the magnifier, counted the ink strokes, and compared them to the elder's ledger entry. He made two decisions. First, to keep a private copy of the scrap in his notebook. Second, to send the initiate a folded note in the margin of a ledger page, giving a safe place to meet for more evidence. Those were concrete actions that shifted the story from emergency to pursuit. He placed the notebook in a locked drawer, closed the lock with the thin bronze signet he always wore, and arranged for the archivist to produce a false cover ledger to hide the scrap in plain sight. The chapter's final, concrete beat occurred at dawn. The keeper delivered the boxed fragments to the vault, and the elder signed the sealing order. The archivist watched the lock snap and set the key into a basket for council hands only. The analyst lingered in the doorway and slipped the singed margin from the pocket of his coat into the pocket of his notebook for safekeeping. He left the council chamber without a word and walked to his study, where he placed the notebook beneath a loose floorboard. He replaced the board and tapped a discrete pattern that matched the mark on the singed scrap. The action was small, physical, and absolute. Concealment and the promise of continued work. He had saved the school from an immediate breach, shattered the corrupted cipher, and preserved a sliver of the truth. In the morning light he smelled coal smoke from the lamps and the slightly sweet scent of ink in the archive. The initiate watched the council leave and held the folio against her chest. The elder walked back to his chamber, shoulders bent, carrying the weight of an order he had justified but could not wholly escape. The archivist returned to her ledgers and wrote the finding into the record. Corrupted tooling. Fragments destroyed. Further review recommended. The analyst closed his study door and slid the singed scrap between 2 pages of his worn leather notebook under the brass magnifier on its cord. He wrote a single, practical note in the margin. Pursue ledger entries. Month 3rd, page 22. Compare with guild bindings list. He circled the line twice. Then he placed the notebook beneath the loose board, and over it he left a plain stack of unused folios. He shut out the lamp and walked to the window where the first pale edge of dawn cut the skyline of Alexandria. The initiate's cries had stopped. The immediate breach had been prevented. But 2 clear facts remained. Someone had altered the map, and the council would not sanction a public search. The analyst felt the coldness of that last fact in the bones of his hands. He swallowed and turned away. The chapter ends with an act, not a speech. The council stamped the archive closed and the keeper locked the vault. The archivist carried the boxed fragments to the inner store. The elder placed his seal upon the order. The analyst, in his private study, pushed the loose floorboard back into place, closed the drawer that held his magnifier and brass ring, and clicked the lock of his notebook shut. He slid the key into the pocket of his coat and left it there. The final line is a single, concrete action. He tapped the door of his study 3 times in a specific rhythm, and then set out toward the scriptorium to meet the initiate in secret, the singed margin still warm in his pocket.